I'm Joni Patry, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'd like to talk about Mars going retrograde and particularly what it means being in the sign of Capricorn this year, 2018. But first I want to talk a little bit about what Mars is all about and how this retrograde process can be so meaningful. So Mars, first of all, in Vedic astrology is called the bright one. And Mars is energy. Mars is the one that initiates things. It really is what activates things in the world. So Mars in a chart rules brothers and sisters, siblings, in other words. It rules violence, anger. It rules weapons, fire. But on the positive side, it rules energy, drive, ambition, courage. And it also rules whenever you have to have a strong Mars in a chart for business success, because Mars is all about the drive and ambition that it takes to be successful. Now, Mars is also the indicator for real estate. And it also rules red, it's fire, and it rules blood. So all of these things come under the domain of Mars. And one thing many don't know is Mars is also the planet of intelligence. People with a strong Mars are vastly intelligent, especially if it's relative to the 5th house or even the 8th house. Albert Einstein has Mars exalted in Capricorn in the 8th house. So it's research, analysis, this is intelligence. But this energetic force that you see in a chart, let's talk about what it means and what it's going to mean this year as it goes retrograde. Mars will turn retrograde June 26th. It will remain retrograde for 2 months till August 27th. And Mars right now is in the sign of Capricorn, which Capricorn is its exaltation sign. This is the sign that gives it its greatest power. And while it is transiting here and with Ketu, it is magnified. It is off the charts powerful. But I believe when a planet turns retrograde, it reverses its quality, it reverses its energy. But whatever that is all about, when Mars goes retrograde, it brings to the surface and to our attention to focus on something specific. And this is relative to the sign that Mars generally is in. So let's talk about Mars cycle for just a moment. Mars spends time, when it's not retrograde, when it's in its normal transit, it will spend approximately 2 months to 6 weeks in a sign. It will go through all 12 signs of the zodiac every 2 years. Mars goes retrograde approximately every 2 years. And in its cyclic process, generally, not always, but generally each 2 years that it turns retrograde, it moves up 1 sign in the zodiac. So when it's in Scorpio, usually the next year it'll be in Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, but not always. Sometimes it can skip a sign and sometimes skip a couple of signs, but regardless, it's always moving forward in terms of the signs that it will turn retrograde consecutively in the future. So this is its pattern. So I want you to know that looking backwards, and sometimes it's not always that entire time that it's retrograde, of course, in the same signs, depending if it's at the end of a sign or the beginning of a sign, it could flank back and forth between 2 signs. But I want you to understand that the sign it's in is so important in terms of what it surfaces for us to really look at analyze, because remember, retrograde simply means to look back, reflect, review, reassess, everything with RE, because this is what Mars, the energy, is bringing up for us to look at. So the sign is highly important. Let me give you some examples. For example, Mars is about to go retrograde, as we know, in the sign of Capricorn. But before that, in 2016, 2 years ago, it was retrograde in Scorpio. Okay, so it was Scorpio. So somehow in this patterning, it is skipping the sign of Sagittarius. It's going from Scorpio to Capricorn. But prior to that, in 2004, Mars was retrograde in Virgo. Prior to that, in 2012, Mars was retrograde in Leo. And prior to that, Mars was retrograde in 2010 in Cancer, in 2008 in Gemini, and Mars was retrograde in Aries in 2005, but it skipped. In 2003, retrograde in Aquarius. So I'm going backwards. Then before that, it was retrograde in 1999 in Libra, and in Virgo and Leo in 1997. So you get a sense of the pattern of its retrograde moving forward through the zodiac. And it takes approximately 16 years for Mars to go through, process through all 12 of the signs and start over with the signs that it turns retrograde in. But let me give you an interesting example. When Mars went retrograde in Virgo, and this would have been 2014, because Virgo is the sign of health and healing and disease, that was the year that the Ebola scare came about, and people were mortified that here is a disease we have no cure from, and it's likely to spread. Here's another instance. Going back to 1982, guess where Mars was? You got it, Virgo. That was the initiation of the start of AIDS. The AIDS virus has killed more people throughout time than any other pandemic or any other event in history. And it was initiated with Mars retrograde in the sign of Virgo. So you start to see the relevance of the sign that Mars is retrograde in. So looking at Mars, and Mars in Vedic astrology we call Mangala. So Mangala, when it was, now that it is in the sign of Capricorn, remember it has a very poignant message for us every time it goes retrograde. It stops, it slows down, and it says, hey, this is what you have to pay attention to now. A lot is about to transpire with this Mars in Capricorn. As the very last time that Mars retrograded in the sign of Capricorn, it skipped some signs. It wasn't since 1971. And in 1971, when Mars was retrograde in Capricorn, it was with Rahu. So it was magnified all the more. But what happened in 1971 is what I predict will be happening in this Mars retrograde. And during that time was the start in all of the rumblings of Watergate with Nixon, as well as the papers came out with the truth of what was really happening at the time during the Vietnam War, which the government had been lying to the people, saying we were successful, we were taken over, this was one of the best things that was happening for us, when absolutely the opposite was true. And when the people discovered the truth, they were enraged, protests. That is what's going to happen again during this Mars retrograde from May 26th through August 27th. But here's another interesting fact about the Mars retrograde. Remember, when a planet goes retrograde, it slows down and stops, goes back and forth, and the speed is changed during this time. Therefore, it will stay in a sign generally about 6 months. And that's why it's so intense. Remember, Mars normally stays in a sign for 2 months. All of a sudden, in the retrograde process, we have Mars staying in a sign for 6 months. Now, unless it's at the end or the beginning of a sign, it could go back and forth out of 2 signs. But at this point, with Mars in Capricorn, it is staying in Capricorn from May 3rd through November 7th. So you're going to see all these rumblings of what Mars in Capricorn is all about. It's going to surface things that we didn't know about governments around the world. And most of all, it may sound like a terrible thing, but it's not, because it's here to heal these issues that have been denied and kept under the carpet, not recognized, not addressed. This is what's about to happen. So with that, I know that Mars is going to create all sorts of rumblings in terms of governments around the world. Why? Because Capricorn is the sign of government and business. And these are all about to shift and change with this huge event. So remember, Mars, I said, is exalted in Capricorn. But when a planet goes retrograde, its whole dynamic and energy changes. It shifts and it looks back. And I believe, and I have seen proof of this, that when a planet's exalted and goes retrograde, it behaves like a debilitated planet, because it brings up the issues that have to be healed in accordance to the sign. And it's Capricorn. And so much needs to be healed around the world in terms of corruption and lies in politics and the government. So this is going to make Mars energetically different when it's retrograde. So this is intense. It brings up the problems. It brings up the necessary things that have to be done to heal these issues that have been left undone for so long. So it will be problematic. I must tell you. But most of all, we're going to see where the problem is and the information on how to eventually heal it. It will take some time though, but I guarantee you, because Mars is with Ketu, this is even more fiery. Remember, they say that Ketu is likened to Mars because it deals with a burning desire. Together with Mars, there is a burning desire. But the retrograde process surfaces and brings up what needs to happen. There is going to be more terrorism. There is going to be more instability and attacks, anger, fire, volcanic eruptions during this Mars retrograde. But things need to surface and explode, just like in a volcanic eruption. This is what is coming forth to heal. It's been underneath the surface so long. So actually, the volcanic eruptions that are occurring right now in Hawaii are the coming forth of the things that have been disregarded and unkept and not addressed. So the anger, the frustration will finally surface and blow up. And what's coming about is a massive healing. And so many things are due to heal. Another thing that's interesting about Mars, whenever it comes to conjoin other planets or patterns, it's a trigger. So when we have eclipses and we have Mars join in the force, it's a trigger for things happening. And the fact that Mars is retrograde, it is going back and forth. there will be a healing from this. It won't be pretty, but that's because so many things have been kept secret for so long. Finally, it will be exposed to the surface to see the angers, the polarization, the fears, everything that's been going on in our society. And I think people are going to start to feel a sense of healing from all of this. So I guarantee you this Mars retrograde, while it's with Ketu and while it's in Capricorn, we're going to see many changes and the world will be a different place after this has been through its processing. Because remember, the planets are always evolving in order for our growth. So all of these cycles are here for humanity to grow through, to process. And even on an individual basis, in your own individual charts, wherever you have the sign of Capricorn, will go through a major healing. If it's in the 7th house, it may be your marriage. So if you're a Cancer ascendant, Capricorn's there, healing through relationship. So recognize that this is going to bring up the things that have been disregarded for so long. And it may feel painful, but it has to happen for a healing. Remember, many things will be and must be destroyed in order for the new to evolve and come forth. And I must say, after this retrograde of Mars, the world will be quite a different place. So with that, I'd like to close. If you would like to learn Vedic astrology, I have a university. This is where you can get more in depth with all of these principles. My university is University of Vedic Astrology.com. And if you're interested in learning more about me or a reading, you can always go to my website, which is galacticcenter.org. And if you would like written transcripts of all that I just discussed, you can go to my magazine, which is astrologicmagazine.com. Thank you.